Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's very first episode of Real Property Pros and Cons, which is a show where we'll talk about real property. We'll talk about the pros who know what they're doing and the cons, which will either lose you money or the people who don't know what they're doing. Today, I have a very special guest, Dalen Cisneros, who's going to talk to us about a super interesting topic, which is crypto. I was talking to him backstage in the green room, and he was saying, yeah, a lot of people refer to it as cryptocurrency, but it's not cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is just a small part of crypto generally. So he's going to talk about that. And other than that, I just want to say I'm super excited, and I hope that this is a fun, exciting, and informative show for everybody who is watching it. And of course, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please ask us in the comments. And I will also be answering viewer questions at some point in the show, or not actually at some point. I'll be answering viewer questions at the very end of the show. And Dalen might be chiming in as well. So without further ado, let's get started and talk about what's going on in the So here is what is new and noteworthy in the real estate world. So according to Fortune magazine on May 23rd, which was a couple of days ago, the home builder stocks are on sale, but investors are not buying. Why is that the case? Well, investors are actually selling off their stocks in home builders because of increasing interest rates. They were completely obliterated and lost a lot of money in 2008 with the housing market crash. And so investors are not interested in investing in home builders because they think that there is another impending crash. Whether or not that's the case, we don't know. However, the author of the article, Michael Joseph Fortune, argues that there are different factors at play currently in the housing market. The first interesting thing that is different is that there is an inventory shortage, which everybody kind of knows, right? If you've been a buyer in the past couple of months, you know that there aren't houses to find. And if you've been a seller, you know that, hey, I sell my house, there's 10, 15 people who are interested in it. And so that means that there's a housing shortage. According to Realtor.com, there is approximately a 5 million unit shortage. That means that we would need to build approximately 5 million new units to make up for the people who are interested in buying homes who are not able to buy homes today. Who are those people? A lot of them are millennials, like me. And millennials are now entering into the housing market, and they make up almost half of all home buyers. What does that mean for home sellers? Well, that means that if you're trying to sell your home, you need to figure out how to make it appealing to millennials, which means make it convenient, make it easy, and make it cheap to the extent that you can do so. And what was really interesting, though, in this article is that home builders are actually turning away business. They have backlogs that are so high that they are just turning people away. Instead of adding one more person to their backlog, they're just saying, you know what, this is not worth it for us. We will let you know if we decide to build this new phase or not. And it's actually kind of significant because generally speaking, it's really interesting that home builders would just not be selling houses anymore, or not selling houses. They'd just be like, yeah, no, we're good for now. A lot of that is because of the supply chain shortages, the lumber shortage, the chip shortage, which is going to impact home building as well. And just now people are saying, you know what, really hard to build houses. So the article actually made a really other interesting point, which is that there's been a really significant change in the home builder business. And the change is that before, home building was a very land heavy purchase or very land heavy industry. What that means is that when people were building homes, large developers, they would actually buy the land, own the land, and then if something happened in the housing market, they would have to get rid of the land or hold on to it and pay taxes on it without really being able to do anything with it. So the home building industry has now moved away from buying the land itself to buying a land option. And so a land option is when the home builder says that I have the option of purchasing this land, and then they'll actually buy the land if they need to build on it. But if they don't buy the land, they don't exercise their option, then they lose a whole lot less than they did if they owned the land itself. So what does that mean? It means that we have shifted from a land heavy industry to a land light industry. And that means that there is less risk for home builders. So that's one thing really interesting going on that's new and noteworthy in the home building industry. Second article that I want to talk about is from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal says Fed searches for magic number to cool a red hot US housing market. So obviously, as everybody knows, there is a red hot US housing market. The housing market has been extremely, extremely, extremely active. It is cooling down slightly now because of the increased interest rates, but it is still not cooling down as much as people would like it to, and also make houses more affordable. And so the opinion article talked about how people are now selling houses and buying houses in different markets. So it used to be that markets were essentially tied to the industries that were in the area, and they were also tied to people who lived there. So if you lived in San Francisco, then you would be buying another house in San Francisco. So a really red hot housing market in San Francisco really didn't affect the housing market in Boise, Idaho. But what's happening now is that remote work is making it easier for people to go somewhere else. So if you have a 5% interest rate and people are not able to afford a house in San Francisco, but they are able to afford a house in, say, San Diego or some other part of the country, Redding, California, or even another state, they can sell their houses and buy a house in a different market where they are relatively less affected by the higher interest rate because the housing market is more affordable to them. So what does that mean? That means that all of the overheated housing market is being affected by, or the housing market is being affected by what's going on in other places. And a February 1st, 2022 Forbes opinion article said remote work is here to stay, and chances are remote work is here to stay. And in November 2021, 4.5 million workers left their jobs because they did not want to continue working for their employers. And now employers are starting to realize that, hey, you know what? We don't actually have a choice, and we're really going to have to be more accommodating to our workers. So, what does that mean? That means that people are able to work remotely, they can work not where they are. And so the housing market is going to continue to get an influx of people from other places. Interestingly enough, however, the market in Boise, Idaho, which apparently was one of the number one places where people moved to from California, has now cooled down significantly. And some real estate agents there were saying that they have a house that has not had a showing in over 3 months. So, what does that mean? Maybe the housing market is cooling down slightly. And last but not least, May 25th, which was yesterday, article from Axios said that the real estate buying frenzy is over. And what does that mean? Well, maybe even though the interest rates are not affecting people as much as they would have in a different market. Yeah, well, maybe now people are not interested in buying anymore. Who knows exactly why that is the case? The change, sort of the lack of buying frenzy, has really helped buyers who are relying on certain types of loans like FHA loans or VA loans, which require less money down. And there are also just fewer cash buyers because cash buyers are afraid that there's going to be an economic downturn, which will affect the housing supply. Also, there is now a housing supply that is building. The housing supply has increased by 8% nationwide in April to 444,000 units, which is a 13-year high. Remember what 13 years ago was sometime around or sometime shortly after the economic crash in 2008. So that means, there's more houses that are available. But what's also interesting is that new home sales fell by almost 20%, 16.6% between March and April. And so that means that, economists, their forecasts of a quarter mil or 750,000 sales in March or April did not happen. It was only just under 600,000 sales nationwide. And so that's a really slow pace of sales. And the last time we saw that pace was in April 2020, which was when the economy kind of went on pause right before we saw an increase. So there's a possibility that the housing market is going to cool down and people will be able to start shopping again without having to make crazy investments that they couldn't have made before or that they didn't want to make before. Of course, there was another article in Fortune that talked about JP Morgan Chase, which said that Bitcoin has some major upsides, whereas real estate might not have those upsides. There's been a lot of sort of activity in the real estate market, a few sort of apartment buildings that are kind of now not selling, high rents, just the economy generally is making investors wary. And so the JP Morgan Chase Bank said, maybe you want to look at cryptocurrency and NFTs and crypto in general in order to make an investment. In general, they said no to alternative investments, but they did say, if you're going to make an alternative investment, maybe you should look at cryptocurrency. And with that, let us bring in our guest, Dalen Cisneros, who will talk to us about not just cryptocurrency, but NFTs in general. All right. Hello and welcome, Dalen. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Be here.
Dalen Cisneros graduated from Michigan State University's Business School in 2018. He is currently a second-year law student at Thomas Jefferson School of Law in sunny San Diego, where he is a clerk in the school's intellectual property clinic. And he also is a writer and editor for the school's Law Review. And for those of you who are not law nerds, Law Review is essentially the top scholarly publication at any law school. Dalen would like to begin his legal career practicing business IP law after passing the California bar. And he wrote an article entitled, "It is Time to Get Serious About Intangible Property," which, as I understand it, intangible property refers to crypto generally, including NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, cryptocurrencies, and all of the other things that exist in what I imagine is kind of a mysterious and interesting world of cryptocurrency. So thank you for being with us, Dalen.
Hey, good to be here. And you're right. Crypto is a type of intangible asset. And it's probably a hotly talked about topic, maybe since 2017. The crypto boom really shot up. Everyone was buying Bitcoin. Everyone was buying Bored Ape NFTs. But not a lot of people really know what they're buying. They don't know what it is that makes this digital asset, this intangible asset, worth $30,000 each. Right? But I guess why I wrote this paper was because I think a lot of people uh, use cryptocurrency and NFTs interchangeably, and it's not quite correct. And I think it's just from the foundation of what like the like from the beginning of crypto, uh, what I guess if you were to put this into law terms, what the framers intended.
Correct. So I guess the first really simple question is what is the difference? First of all, it is property. So is cryptocurrency, crypto or NFTs, are those actually is that property? Is it real property? Is it a security? Is it we don't know what it is? Like why how does it relate to real property and all of those other things?
I will start with an answer I've always wanted to give. It depends. Depends who you ask. If you ask the SEC, of course they're going to think it's security. If you ask me, I think it's property, and I think a lot of people would see it that way if you saw, like, for example, right? Let's take playing cards. Playing cards are just like. Would you dispute me if I told you that a trading card was just a piece of cardboard with some information on it? Probably not.
No, that's what they are.
And would you dispute me if like the physical card, the cardboard, was chattel, was like personal property?
Yeah, I mean it's personal property. You can own it, you can sell it, you can whatever.
On that note, it is not a security because, well, one, it's not listed as a security, and it's actually a collectible, and it has very similar characteristics to what an NFT is. And if trading cards aren't NFT, or I'm sorry, if trading cards aren't securities, NFTs aren't securities, and that knocks down the list of what it should be categorized as.
Right. And also for our viewers, what exactly is a security?
So a security is an investment. Well, this comes from a very popular case. It's SEC versus Howey. It's the investment in a common enterprise with the expectation to profit based solely on the efforts of others. So, in layman's terms, it's basically it's what you think of like Wall Street. It's investing in a stock, and you're having a broker just like, okay, take it out, buy, sell, buy, sell. It's basically the efforts of others. All you're doing is inputting money. So, like, what's going around NFTs right now is a lot of people are buying an NFT, not knowing what they are, but they're buying it with the intention to profit based on the efforts of others, i.e., interest. But I would argue that the same thing is for trading cards. When you buy a trading card, you're buying a LeBron card because I think it's going to have value. When I buy a Michael Jordan shoe, I'm buying it either because I like it, but maybe back in the day when it was still a big thing, I was expecting to profit from it. But these are all property, like chattel, and NFTs should kind of be seen the same way.
And chattel is just personal property. It's your stuff.
Yeah, fancy word.
Yeah, fancy legal word for stuff, right? You know, your shoes, your car, your keys, your brand new diamond ring that you got because you're getting engaged. All of those are chattel. And so so basically you're saying it. So I wonder, sort of, is there really a common enterprise element to NFTs or cryptocurrency, or is it really just sort of, like gold,
I would argue, well, I wouldn't argue this, but the SEC would have you believe that all all crypto is the same. All of crypto is to be treated equally, and respectfully, I don't agree. I think they all have different characteristics. And just from going back to what I was saying about the framers of crypto, there are four main, I guess, classifications, and they're called tokens, if you will, of crypto. There's transactional tokens, which is Bitcoin. Those are the cryptocurrencies that we think of when we hear Bitcoin. There's utility tokens. Those are the kinds of tokens that they are technically also kind of NFTs, but they're very, very popular. They're in a game called Candy Crush. Candy Crush. So a utility token is a transactional token that only works on a particular platform. So in Candy Crush, you can buy lives by buying gold bars, or if you play video games, you can buy whatever the virtual currency for that video game to buy cosmetics. That is a utility token. Then there's security tokens, which are, more or less the art. It's a bond, a debuncture, anything that you really kind of invest truly is, has no value other than it's like other people just want it, I guess. And then you have NFTs, non-fungible tokens. These are very distinct because they have a very distinct technology in them, and that is smart contracts, separate from, let's say, cryptocurrency. NFTs, for one, almost exclusively run on the Ethereum blockchain. And they run their own protocols, and Bitcoin does their own thing. Smart contract is essentially a self-executing contract. And why I think NFTs are, or why people should care about NFTs, is because it's not that it's the future, it's that it's already here and we don't really see it. Like I was saying in Candy Crush, right? But I'll take you back even a little bit more. I guess probably the most prominent smart contract is Kickstarter. So it's essentially a self-executing contract, and it's how smart contracts work. When an entrepreneur wants to bring a product to market, they might go to Kickstarter and I say, I want $10,000 for me to do this. If the funding for that project does not reach the goal, everybody gets their money back. The contract does not go through. But if it does meet that goal, it's a self-executing contract. The money's released and it goes to the inventor, and that's essentially how a smart contract works. Very similarly, that's how NFTs operate. And if you kind of relate that into real estate, which is which it doesn't have to be just chattel. It's not something that you own. It's a technology that you can use in real estate. Let's say there's this technology called tokenization, where if let's say there's $1 million house. Not a lot of people have $1 million just laying around. But similar to Kickstarter, if you just wanted to fund, you know what, I got 10,000 to throw at it. Let's try to all go in on this house, and I will reap the benefits from whatever percentage that I got. It makes real estate a little bit more accessible to those who otherwise couldn't afford it.
So I wonder, how is that, say, different from like a REIT, which is essentially the same concept, right? So a real estate investment trust is a bunch of people who pool together money. A lot of them, some of them you have to be an accredited investor, others you don't have to be an accredited investor. But, how is that, say, different from a REIT where everybody pools their money and then afterwards they get distributions from the sort of income produced from the asset, as compared to, purchasing your own home where maybe you don't want to have a self-executing contract and you just, it would probably just be with the bank, right? So I feel like it would be something where you could hypothetically have a self-executing contract where once the bank gets a certain amount of money, the title automatically gets transferred to the person who borrowed the money. But, Yeah, so there's a lot in there, but like the main question was, how is this different from REITs and other sort of investment trusts where, people throw in a little bit of money and then get returns, or syndication, I guess, too.
I would say first, the internet is a lot more. You can reach a lot more things simply just by connecting to the internet. It's a lot easier to do things from your home instead of having to deal with uh, all the title company lawyers and all that, all the paperwork that always has to be done in a real estate transaction. And to that end, let's say a deal goes wrong, right? Or let's say it's you die at the wrong time. When it's recorded on the blockchain, it's also authenticated that it actually happened. So whoever your next of kin is, whoever is in your will, they will assume that very similarly, but there wouldn't be as many issues of authentication or in finding an error because it's on the blockchain. It's very transparent, and everyone presumably knows who actually owns what.
And I guess,
Litigation.
I'm sorry.
So in short, less litigation.
Less litigation, which, for transactional attorneys is great, right? It sounds like transactional attorneys, almost in the future of this hypothetical future, might benefit from, learning how these things work so that they can operate within that space. But it doesn't sound like you're arguing or saying that humans are unnecessary because of the blockchain. It sounds like you're saying that humans can sort of help the blockchain achieve specific goals for certain reasons.
I would agree with that characteristic. I think a lot of it. I mean, I don't think lawyers will ever be extinct, regardless of what I'm saying. But because there's always going to be some mess ups. Everyone's going to want to go into a deal not knowing it, or the terms of the NFT are just bad. That's how you set yourself up for failure. That's actually a con of NFTs. You're locked in. If you have a bad deal, you can't get out. You can't repudiate the contract. You're locked in.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess in theory, those same contracts. So are you essentially arguing that NFTs, and I'm going to vaguely apologize to anybody who's watching who's not, a lawyer, but like I'm wondering if you're basically arguing that NFTs are just sort of contracts. When you say self-executing, you don't mean self-executing in terms of like self-signing. You mean self-executing as in there are trigger points and then things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Is that what you were going to say?
Very similar. There's also another technology called zero knowledge proofs, which will probably make its way into NFTs, which is another step or layer to protect privacy. So a zero knowledge proof is proving that you know an answer, and this is in layman's terms, proving that you know an answer to a question. So if I came to Franz with like an unreal, like certain answer, like green beans, Moonlight Sonata, whatever. Those are the keywords. And he is also a node on the blockchain who also is looking for some node that says green beans, Moonlight Sonata. You don't know any more than the information that you need to know to make the transaction happen. And that's that.
And that can also help for a self-executing contract as well, because it just says, okay, you have this information, therefore that means that this thing must happen.
Yes. And okay, yeah, now I remember what I was going to say. If it does, then it rejects the contract. That's really the only way that the smart contract would fail. But
is if you don't have if the node doesn't have the answer.
Yes.
Interesting.
Because the blockchain.
So that's interesting. So, I mean, how do you see sort of crypto? I mean, so I guess then there's this question about cryptocurrency itself, like that people transact in cryptocurrency. And so how does that actually work? So people are buying so I like read an article about people buying, houses in cryptocurrency, which might mean that they have a lot less money than they did before if they accepted Bitcoin for their house. But that aside, how does that actually work? Are you just giving somebody money or
Well,
something of like, what is that exactly?
you are giving them something of value, and I guess that, in a sense, is what currency is, because currency is just cotton that's rolled with some ink on it. Whoever decided way back in the day, you know what? We're going to print notes. This is worth something. It's kind of the same thing. We're like, you know what? We're done printing notes. We're just going to keep it digital because we're almost a cashless society now. I mean, everybody, I think this is not a real stat, but I'm sure like 8 out of 10 people probably just use a credit card and don't carry cash. And that's kind of why Bitcoin is kind of on the rise that it's taking, because a lot of people know that there's going to be some sort of digital currency, maybe not necessarily Bitcoin. There are other cryptocurrencies that actually peg its value to the US dollar, which would, in theory, make it less volatile. Whereas Bitcoin, its value is derived from how many people want it. It's a commodity. The more that people think Bitcoin is valuable, the more it'll be worth, and the less, as you see in the crash now. And there's going to be a lot of big dips. I think a lot of the challenges that Bitcoin will face is a lot of those market scares.
And I wonder to what extent you think that, the volatility of the market is also due to like the people who are investing in cryptocurrency or people who have invested in cryptocurrency, because I think, very high level sophisticated investors understand fluctuations in the market, and they also understand, if I hold on to this asset, or they have sophisticated models that help them understand, what is going to happen with this asset, and should I hold on to it or should I not. Whereas I think you have a lot of retail investors in cryptocurrency, and also frankly a lot of younger investors in cryptocurrency who simply by virtue of age don't really have the adult experience of going through multiple markets, and so might react sort of irrationally to some extent, or if not irrationally, then react in a very volatile way, in a way that other investors or sophisticated investors or seasoned investors simply are not going to. And I wonder how you think that's going to affect the crypto market generally.
I think, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that crypto is largely unregulated. I don't think that's like a very off the cuff thing to say. I think a lot of it has to do with misclassification. I think if sophisticated buyers obviously know what they're buying, and you're right, to your point, they have models. They've done this on the stock market. They are more or less experienced in this. And two issues that I see are one, rug pulls, which is basically funding a project into a point where it's making a lot of money. It's clearly not going anywhere, and whoever the project starter is clearly has no intention to further the project, and just rug pulls, takes all the money and run. You see that a lot in the news, and well, actually not a lot, but it goes largely unreported, and that's honestly a downside of crypto. We say that crypto is safe because everything's recorded on the blockchain. My big beef with that notion is, what about all the off-chain transactions? A lot that can go on off-chain. Coinbase and all those big companies they play ignorant to that.
And what is the difference of like transactions on chain versus off chain?
So
are they like fractional transactions or
no? So like on chain, you would probably have what you would call a wallet. It's half the time it's just a USB. It's a very fancy, overpriced USB with a PIN code. And a hot wallet is one that connects to the internet. A cold wallet is one that maybe just like a piece of paper. So an on-chain transaction is one that happens on the blockchain, on the internet. It gets recorded, and by virtue of blockchain technology, it gets recorded, and everyone verifies that the transaction is true and it happened. Everyone's on notice. That's an on-chain transaction, kind of in a nutshell. But crime happens. I mean, that's like I was just saying about art. Art is a huge part of crypto, and art gets laundered all the time. That's the underground currency. So what is to stop me from having a $2 million Bitcoin wallet and just handing it to Franz? The transaction was never recorded on the blockchain, but Franz now has a flash drive or a wallet worth $2 million. That would be an off-chain and something that's a lot harder to trace.
So it essentially becomes like money, like
yes.
And also, I mean, I remember a little bit earlier you talked about sort of the blockchain being fungible, or is it fungible? Like, is one Bitcoin the same as another Bitcoin, or is there different desirability to different Bitcoins?
So there's like their cryptocurrencies. They have like the main project, and then they have their side projects. I'm sure Bitcoin has a bunch of smaller projects, but in terms of fungibility, the way that I see it is, it's easier to talk in fiat money terms. $1 here in California is still $1 in Michigan. The value does not change. The value is still 100 pennies.
Right.
But
10 dimes, 4 quarters.
Had to add that
up. Right.
But let's take a non-fungible asset. The Mona Lisa, if painted by somebody else other than Leonardo DiCaprio, or I'm sorry,
Leonardo da Vinci.
Da Vinci.
Although I would love to see a Leonardo DiCaprio painted Mona Lisa.
Wine night.
Yes, or he could get to, he could probably create like an NFT that is a Leonardo DiCaprio Mona Lisa, and then we can see how much that's worth.
As long as it's not a rug pull.
Yes.
There are a bunch of celebrities that you'd be surprised have just been caught up in that dilemma. Floyd Mayweather being a big name for that too. He's probably botched 3, don't quote me on that, but at least 2 a project.
I mean, it happens.
Yeah, to the tune of like $1 million maybe. So he's really out here scamming his fan base, and I think a lot of celebrities that don't know or are very disingenuous about their involvement in crypto. It's very apparent. They just don't know anything other than say, "Oh wow, this ape is cool. It looked cool. I paid $1 million for it." Okay, but when you look at the terms and conditions of like whoever sold you that NFT, don't quote me again, but 9 times out of 10, I'm sure that you probably have no copyright license, no right to anything. Basically, you basically bought a picture for $1 million. But what I'm saying is NFTs can do more than that in the smart contract, and I don't think enough people know that.
So, okay, I'm a lawyer. You're a future lawyer. I'm also a real estate broker. So now here's sort of the question for smart contracts. What do you see as? I have 2 questions. The first question is, what do you see as sort of being the future of smart contracts and sort of the role of lawyers or real estate brokers or those kinds of people in a smart contract? And the second question that I have is, mistakes happen, right? You've got the famous chicken problem where they thought that it was like one ship with chickens and it was actually a different ship with chickens, and which I'm sure you read in your contract class, right? So like
Yep.
that stuff happens all the time. So my first question is, where do you see as kind of being the future of NFTs in that specific context? And then my second question is, how do you see fixing the mistakes? Are mistakes fixable?
I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to your second question. That's very tough. That's a little bit ahead of my time, I think. NFTs will not even get there for maybe 10 years. But for the future that I see in general with all industries, I do think that there's going to be more communication. It's more collaboration. So, I mean, a lot of people know escrow sucks. Title companies, they suck. They're slow. Everybody just is never really on the same page. But with blockchain,
I feel like
actually,
so just
explain
just to pop in a plug for like my friends in escrow and title. Like I know some really awesome escrow officers who really do a good job, and
I'm
I
sure,
know
I'm sure people are great and people are doing great at their job. I think just the process itself is very tedious, and that's what sucks. I'm giddy about having a house if I'm trying to be if I'm trying to be a homeowner, and I got all this red tape that I have to cross that could have been done, more or less all at the same time.
probably. But I think that like really nicely goes into my second question, which is how do you fix mistakes? Part of the reason why we have a slow process is because mistakes happen. So, how many people accidentally, there was a story about a woman in Texas whose like kid accidentally bought like 500 Big Macs or something because she left her phone unlocked, and then she got a delivery on DoorDash for like a bunch of Big Macs, and it's like she paid for it and then donated it to her neighbors or whatever, but like you know that's one thing. But if you've got that which happens and somebody accidentally like buys out an entire building in Manhattan accidentally, maybe the slow process is beneficial there.
I would agree. And again, that's a tough issue to tackle because mistakes do happen. It's hard, and even in like autonomous cars. Like we say that it's very safe, but there's still a chance of accidents.
Right.
Just like in these contracts, I mean, computers are only perfect to the extent that the programmer makes it perfect. There's always going to be a mistake, and I think there should be some systems in place that flag or trigger such a catastrophic change in spending or just such a big event like buying half a building in Manhattan. Maybe that's going to require some escrow. Like, but to that point, I also like to relate it to hospitals. Right, when you transfer hospitals, your personal information, the hospital already knows whether you go to hospital, whether you get treated in California, Michigan, Florida. Every hospital with a blockchain database would be able to access your information. Think of it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see some benefit to that. But in the specific real estate context, I can really see some benefits to, having a somewhat slower process. And also, it's a big purchase. Like, how often do you or does anybody go buy something and they're like, did I really need to buy that? And, a lot of times the I mean, I have no data on this, but how easy it is to buy something, I can just speak for my own self. Like, if I can just click on something and I buy it and then I get it, I'm like, why did I buy this? But like, if I have to like physically go to the store and look for it and, buy it, stand in line, more often than not, like when I'm standing in line and there's like 20 people in line, I'm looking at it and I'm like, do I really want this enough? And then sometimes I do, but then other times I'm just like, you know what, this isn't worth it, and I'll leave it. So like, I do wonder, and this might not be a question that you really can answer, but really I do wonder about like, how do you balance human nature that way?
I mean, there are systems like there's refund. Like I take gaming. If you make a bad purchase, like you know what, I don't like this cosmetic, you could refund it. But a lot of games limit you to how much you can refund. Maybe 3 a month, or your point about escrow, maybe a day after, adding another "Are you sure?" button. Like, so like I have purchased. Are you sure? Yes. Are you really sure? Like maybe an hour later, after the buyer's remorse. But I guess the point is to alleviate buyer's remorse, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can also alleviate buyer's remorse somewhere. Well, Dalen, do you have any? You're not actually going away because we'll be answering some viewer questions, and we'll be doing that together. However, I would like to know, do you have anything you'd like to say before we move on to our last segment? Last segment.
Nope. Just thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me ramble about crypto.
Absolutely. Well, you will be back to ramble with some viewer questions, but I will be back and we'll have our last segment, Ask a Pro with Franz Farrow. All right, our last segment, Ask the Pro with Franz Farrow, and now Dalen Cisneros, who's our special guest. And I have 3 questions, which, Dalen, you might also be able to answer. The first one I know you can answer. First question is, what is a mortgage?
Oh man, it's been a while. Okay, a mortgage is are we a lien state?
Yes, we're a lien state.
Like a oh man, dude, I haven't been asked this in a bit.
Okay, sorry, I put you on the spot. I won't do that. So for whoever asked this question, a mortgage, a lot of people think of mortgages as like, it is the loan that I get in order to buy a house. That is actually not actually the legal definition of a mortgage. So you can sound really smart and impress your friends when you tell them, hey, a mortgage is not the loan. The mortgage is actually the thing that you give the bank that tells them, if I don't give you this money back, you can sell my house. So that is what the mortgage is. The mortgage is the document that is given to the bank, essentially allowing you to tell the bank, you can sell my house if I don't pay back this debt. And so that means that the mortgage requires 2 components. It requires the debt, and it also requires the promise to the allowance to sell the asset if you don't pay back the debt. So that is what a mortgage is, and that's really, I don't know, whoever asked that. It's a kind of a nerdy question, but I really like the question because mortgages actually are not exactly what we think they are. And of course, there's, in a more traditional sense, the mortgage, people think of it as a loan. And there's all kinds of loan, different types of loans. There's all kinds of loans available to people who want to buy houses. And there's, FHA loans and USDA loans and VA loans and conventional loans and 80/20 loans and other loans that I'm not aware of, but there's all kinds of loans, and they all are ways of essentially acquiring property with money that is not yours. So eventually you'll pay it back. I'm sorry.
That's a better answer than I would have given.
Well, If I hadn't put you on the spot, you would have prepped, but I put you on the spot. So I am sorry. Second question. I will not put you on the spot, but if you want to answer it, you can.
Is that the clause?
Yeah, what is time is of the essence?
I know it in my head, but I probably wouldn't be able to explain it as well as you could.
Well, so time is of the essence essentially means you have to do things in the time that's specified in the contract. And so this is actually, so as I've mentioned, as is on my bio for the show, I did not mention this at the beginning of the show since I am actually a lawyer. And I am a real estate lawyer. I'm also a real estate broker. Time is of the essence is the clause that you put in the contract that tells people that you need to do something by the time you say you're going to do it. So this has actually been a serious issue very recently. And I'm going to say I'm not giving you legal advice. If you think you have a legal problem, you should actually talk to a lawyer and call them and talk to them, and they will tell you if you have a legal problem or not. There's a very good chance you do, or they will say that you do. But as a practical matter, I'm not giving legal advice. But I have seen a lot of people recently who have entered into home remodeling contracts where they have a contractor, and the contractor is going to remodel their home in some way. And then they say, the contractor hasn't delivered in 6 months. And I say, okay, is there a time is of the essence clause? And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, send me the contract. And then they send me the contract and I read through it and I'm like, I'm going to have to figure out a reason why them not performing when they say they would is an actual problem for you. Because otherwise, the way this contract is structured, that January 30th deadline that you put into it was a suggestion. Not a firm like you have to do it that way by then. So that's what time is of the essence is. It certainly in California, and I imagine we might have viewers not in California, but certainly in California, there's a ton of things that need to be in contracts, especially home improvement contracts. A time is of the essence clause is not one of them. So, either make sure that the lawyer who is drafting it puts it in so that at the very least, you have grounds for canceling your contract if you don't want to do that. Do you have any additional thoughts, Dalen?
I think you put it really well.
Awesome.
That is a material breach.
I'm sorry?
Breaching that clause is a material breach, and you're probably going to lose that breach of contract claim.
Exactly. It is a material breach if you breach that clause, whereas if it's not, then it's a non-material breach. So non-material breach might be something like, forgetting to sign a document, or, you said that the paint was going to be like
white, or
exactly. It's like you said this was going to be like eggshell white, and it's like, some other type of white, and it's like this is not a material breach.
Yeah.
Yes. Or like this was supposed to be beige, and this place got rid of all of their beige paint, and so we went to somebody else, and it's roughly the same shade, but it's called like cream or something. It's like that's not a material breach. Yeah. So that's what a time is of the essence clause is. And the last, very, very last question that I will answer is, what is a contingency? Contingencies are things that need to be done before the contract can close or before somebody has to perform. So for example, in daily, so like you can talk about these self-executing contracts. Self-executing contracts essentially are contracts where when the contingency is met, the rest of the things happen, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess you can even, if you use like the Candy Crush example, a contingency might be like there have to at least be 3 in a row. When there are 3 in a row, then something happens and then all of the little things disappear. And then if there's like 5 in a row, then it turns into like something else, which allows you to like do something. I mean, I haven't played Candy Crush in a really long time.
Qualifying for a loan, like you have to have some certain, you have to meet some certain requirements to get the loan. That would be a contingency. Or if you're in real estate, and I guess you want like a particular survey done. You have to have the survey done. You have all these things before the contract. You can get into digging.
Exactly. Yeah, those are all contingencies. So essentially, contingencies protect you and ensure that you do not have to um, close on a contract that you don't want to close on. And as much as possible, especially if you're buying or selling real estate, you want to have as many contingencies as possible so that if something isn't true or something doesn't actually show up, then you can back out of the contract and not be stuck in it. And the same is true both for buyers and sellers, because again, from all of this news that I was talking about earlier, we are definitely moving into what will probably be more of a buyer's market. And so, sellers need to have contingencies as well to ensure that they can, back out of a deal if they want to. Buyers also need contingencies so they can back out of a deal. And even now, like with the market as it is, contingencies, if you put them in, they can allow the seller to back out with the buyer that they don't want if somebody is willing to pay more for their house or is willing to do it on better terms. Contingencies allow a seller to say, okay, I don't want you, buyer, let's find somebody else. So that is our time. I want to thank Dalen very much for being here with us. I wish you a long and prosperous career as an IP, intellectual property attorney. I think you have a very likely future in that field. I also want to thank my video design person, Hunter Haddock, who on very short notice created all of the little intros that we saw. Thank you so much, Hunter. I would also like to thank E360 TV for hosting this, and also would like to thank my social media manager, Tamara Collins, for promoting this on social media and continuing to promote it on social media after we finish this episode. So thank you, everybody, and I will see you same time, same place next week. Have a great rest of your day.